I'm very glad to have on Bad Faith podcast for the first time, Jenin Younes. She's the National Legal Director at the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. You might have become familiar with her recently after she got into a back and forth with J.D. Vance on Twitter over the legality of the Minnesota shooting of Renee Good. And subsequently, she appeared on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart to discuss. Welcome to Bad Faith podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so you are a First Amendment maven. Give us a little background on how you ended up entangled in the back and forth with J.D. Vance.
Sure. So actually, before I was a First Amendment lawyer, I was a public defender in New York, which was why I decided I had the background to weigh in on the issue of the officer's right to defend himself, or lack thereof, as I would put it. So I actually was a public defender for a long time, and then I would have considered myself on the left, I guess, although I have kind of weird politics I can discuss more or not later. And I was against COVID restrictions, which was very unusual for people on the left side of the political spectrum. So I ended up taking a job at sort of a right-leaning libertarian litigation boutique firm that was challenging COVID restrictions. And then in that area, I got involved in cases about government pressuring social media companies to censor speech about COVID, sort of disfavored narratives and viewpoints. And then I got sort of more into the First Amendment generally. And after October 7th, had a lot of disagreements with my colleagues. So I ended up, it took me a little while to decide what I wanted to do, but I took a job with the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. They had recognized that censorship of pro-Palestine speech was one of the biggest First Amendment issues our country faces right now. And I really wanted to fight that battle. So that's what I'm doing now. But with all that background, I thought that I had the knowledge to weigh in on whether the officer had a right to defend himself in the manner that he did or claimed he did. So I basically said he didn't, and I went over the various reasons why. J.D. Vance decided to quote tweet me. I don't know why me. There were plenty of people to quote tweet, and sort of called my take preposterous and did a long, pretty long post about it. And then I responded. I think that was about the end of it between us.
Yeah, I mean, from an outsider's view, it seemed like it's one of those hit dogs will holler situation, and he engaged with you because you were very measured and persuasive. And perhaps even, I don't know how much he knew about your background, but, look, a lot of people, myself included, had a very strong emotional reaction to what we had seen and responded with a mix of sort of political arguments or legal arguments and emotiveness. And I think that there is that has its place. But I think that in some ways easier to dismiss than what was a really sort of streamlined legal analysis from your perspective that I think from the outside perspective maybe was triggering because it made J.D. Vance insecure,
Yeah.
Like it's easier to brush away someone who just is clearly coming from an ideological perspective is perhaps the neater way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah, that may very well be it. And it's possible he knows who I am. I don't know. He certainly knows some of my former clients and colleagues. So, it's quite possible he has some sense that I'm not necessarily someone he can just say is like on the left and so is going to disagree with him on everything.
Right. I have to ask you, so you were a public defender. From my experience of, being friends with public defenders in New York, it's a very sort of left-leaning group of people ideologically. You end up part of a libertarian organization because of your critique of censorship around certain COVID issues, which we should definitely come back to. But then you said when October 7th happened, you found that to be a difficult place to work. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I should probably be a little careful. I found I was very alone in not being like, Israel should just raise Gaza. My father's actually Palestinian, so I know quite a bit about the conflict. And I was sort of aware of the repression that Palestinians face. And that's not to say that I have to do the song and dance about October 7th not being justified. That's not to say I'm, advocate for what they did, but there's context to it. And I've always been of the view that Israel is the much stronger party and has all the control in the situation and has been keeping Palestinians under occupation because they can and they want the land. And so eventually something like this was likely to happen. And just saying, these guys are bad, and so we have to kill them all, and no matter how many people, innocent people, go along with it, is not the right approach.
Was this a First Amendment org, or what was
the organization?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Did this reflect a sort of hypocrisy with respect to their attitudes towards speech, given how much censorship has been a part of the story post October 7th, or did that aspect of it not come up? They generally were just broadly pro-Israel Zionists.
So, I mean, my office didn't engage in international or foreign policy. We didn't have anything to do with that. So it wasn't like they were taking official positions. And there actually were a couple people who voiced views that were more sympathetic to mine eventually. But there was a lot of hostility. And it wasn't just at my office. It was also at like events. And there were actually attempts by some names you might recognize, like pretty prominent right-wing lawyers who were trying to get me fired, like concerted campaigns. Like Ilya Shapiro, Alan Gura, who did the Heller case. I don't know if you're familiar with the Second Amendment case. They just absolutely hated me. Super, super pro-Israel. They tweeted things like, they were happy if all the kids died because then they couldn't, perpetrate their terrible culture and stuff like that. So it was more like, I don't really want to necessarily put down my office that I think was principled on speech to an extent, but it was like the environment I just kind of wanted to get out of because it was very, very uncomfortable for me.
I don't, it's not about your office place per se, but I am curious about what your experience of the sort of ideological inconsistency that free speech advocates encounter, I think more than maybe folks in other who have different sorts of focus in other places. And I, could be similarly charged with, not really, but so take for example, the trajectory from being sort of antagonistic with the left, or at least liberals and the establishment left in the context of COVID, where to articulate the possibility that lab leak theory was a possible origin, got you called, a racist, where discussing, pushing back against the idea that a vaccine will stop transmission, or, questioning the flip-flopping around some of the mask guidance in the early days was considered very right-wing and ultimately led to some online censorship. You find yourself on one side of things. And then obviously in the context of the Gaza censorship, it's been completely reversed. Many of the conservatives who were very worried about sort of creeping government overreach and authoritarianism in the context of COVID are very happy to see, Twitter purchased for the purpose of suppressing a pro-Palestine speech, and have been very silent about the suppression that's happened on Twitter, despite Elon Musk sort of branding himself as buying the app for the purposes of liberating speech. So I do wonder how you view the First Amendment as even an organizing principle for folks when it's been so flagrantly disregarded by folks who made it their entire banner.
Right. Yeah, that's a fair question. So, and there is a lot of, there's a lot of hypocrisy on the right on this subject. And I could, like, RFK Jr. is a prime example. He brought a case alongside ours, actually, that our case ended up in the Supreme Court. His didn't. But I talked to him. I actually worked briefly in Congress and helped organize a hearing where he testified, and he literally moved me to tears in his defense of free speech. And within days of taking his position as director of HHS, I guess is the title, he was announcing initiatives to withhold funds from universities for not adequately tamping down on anti-Semitism, which, of course, we all know means pro-Palestine speech. So a lot of specific people I can point to as being extremely hypocritical. But I guess my take on it is not that the First Amendment isn't a good idea or that I can't stick up for it. It's that a lot of people are hypocritical around it. And I do call them out pretty relentlessly all the time. What
do you make of the sort of the Twitter censorship aspect of it in particular, because I do remember, covering the Twitter files when I was back on Rising before I was censored off of Rising for pro-Palestine speech. Feeling like more investigation into a document trove that's being made available is a good thing. The knee-jerk liberal hostility toward Matt Taibbi is a bad thing, but the sort of obsequious trust in what you were being given in this archive was also misplaced, and that you can investigate what you've been given without going so far as to say Elon Musk is a defender of free speech rights, or that we know for a fact, because of what has been disclosed to us, that the overwhelming thrust of censorship is from the liberal left against the right, and not censorship against the left, like the Bernie left or whomever else, farther than left than Bernie. That was my critique of how the Twitter files were handled, but not substantively the fact of them in and of themselves. Now I feel frankly very validated by those critiques. And my understanding is that you had some more intimate knowledge of what was going on there, and some relationship with some of the people who were charged with doing the investigation. And so I'm curious to hear you sort of weigh in on what you think has happened sort of now that the conservatives are in the reins, and the critiques of a liberal government deploying censorship techniques are no longer they're not in power anymore. How has this been playing out in your view?
Well, it is interesting to see people like Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, the latter of whom I like. I don't like Matt Taibbi at all, but he told me to fuck myself. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. Yeah.
Yeah, you can swear away, my friend. Wait, in what context did he ask you to go fuck yourself?
Oh, so I had criticized him for an article he published saying that people who were upset about Barry Weiss taking over CBS were just jealous losers.
Right.
And I'd sort of explain, as I usually try to be measured, I actually make a point of not tweeting when I'm emotional. I wait. So I just made a sort of measured critique about how those I learned from myself. How, that's utterly preposterous. Like, we're upset because she's clearly biased, and it's upsetting to see somebody who's been pro-censorship of pro-Palestine speech take over a major news station and be rewarded for being a pretty bad person. And so I happened to see him at an event that week. I think I ratioed him on his own tweet, and so he was pissed. And then at the event, I said, like, hey, Matt. And he was like, go fuck yourself.
Stop. Wait, in person he said it?
Yeah.
I'm imagining a tweet, or like a DM.
No, it was rather late in the evening. He might have been drinking. It was like a gala thing. But yeah, so we are not friends. But I think they've been. He has been brazenly hypocritical, I would say. He was confronted about the fact that he never spoke up about Mahmoud Khalil and others who were put in deportation proceedings for being pro-Palestine. And he sort of said something like, I'm not going to make a big thing out of 2 failed deportations. Like, I think referring to Rameza Ozturk and Mahmoud Khalil. Like, I'm sorry, that's not what this is. There were a lot more people. They're not failed. Mahmoud Khalil's was actually just by the Third Circuit.
Yeah.
And that kind of government action has an extreme chilling effect. I can guarantee you there are millions of non-citizens who are not saying anything on these topics because they're terrified that they're going to be removed from their families and end up in, behind bars or being deported or both. So to dismiss that is so, I think what the Biden administration did was bad, but they weren't putting people behind bars. They weren't snatching them off the streets. What happened was your social media account was suspended or deleted, which is bad for some people, I admit. I don't want to downplay that. Some people earn their livings off it. It can be a really big problem, and I'm very sympathetic to their gripes about it. But putting people behind bars, taking them away from their families and their wives who are about to give birth is quite a bit worse.
Yeah, the proportionality of it has been the question since the beginning. Frankly, look, let me not rehash my frustrations with Matt Taibbi. I do it too much in this podcast. But the line that he's been giving people these days is, it's not my responsibility to pick up on your pet issue. It's not my responsibility to tweet about the thing that you happen to think is important. which obviously falls flat when you spend 2 seconds ruminating on the fact that he has made his career being a champion of First Amendment issues.
Yeah.
And then also he'll sort of cherry pick, well, I wrote a whole book on criminal justice. You can't accuse me of not caring about criminal justice. Okay, well, when you're also tweeting, I'm not going to weigh it, what I'm going to say about Renee Good is that I'm going to retweet some other person who's referring to her as like a blue hair liberal, referring to her as a Karen or something.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a clear implication of where your sympathies lie. Or when he tweets, I'm not going to weigh in on whether ICE is good or bad, but what's the utility of doing a protest in a church? Okay, you wrote the book on criminal justice. ICE is a ratcheted up version of the police overreaches that you purported to critique in this book, but you're not going to weigh in on whether or not ICE is good or bad. I mean, this is why you're getting the pushback that you're gotten, precisely because you have this record and this legacy that many of us respected, and many of us, frankly, defended for longer than we should have.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
off. Oh, no. I mean, I just couldn't agree with you more. I mean, and I think that's the issue, is you can't make free speech your brand and then be like, yeah, but I'm just not going to talk about what the Trump administration is doing. That's it. I mean, that suggests you're compromised in some way. I don't know if it's audience capture. I don't know if there's more going on. I don't know if it's some kind of emotional attachment to he just wants to think Biden is the bad guy, and he's gotten decided not to be sort of objectively critical of civil liberties violations. But whatever it is, it's hypocritical and it's not consistent. And he's clearly very angry because, his behavior towards me and others suggests
I can't believe he cursed at you in real life. I mean, maybe this is something about me that I'm completely tolerant of the idea that people are assholes on Twitter, and I have some expectation of civil, that's not real. Twitter isn't real life. But to lose your cool in that regard, it really does feel like a hit dog will holler situation. I'd like for there to be some kind of come to Jesus moment for him where he flips back in the other way, but I just don't see it happening.
I don't think it's going to happen. No, he's been called out so much. I think he's digging his heels in. And I had been pretty polite. I actually said, it's disappointing because I really respect your work or respected your work. So I'm, disappointed to see someone So I wasn't I wasn't calling him names or anything like that, but
well, when I want to get really conspiratorial, my theory, having had an account with a large following on Twitter for many years now and weathering many, bot attacks and pylons and having a talent for pattern recognition. I think that people who start campaigns, whether they're bots or real people behind them, they've done some psychological evaluation, and they know that people are more likely to be triggered by and respond to and become overwhelmed by the brand of critique that says, oh, I really like you, or I used to follow you, or I really like your show, but I really respect you 9 times out of 10, but I don't like X, Y, and Z. Because it makes you, we are more sensitive to in-group criticism than out-group criticism.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Nowadays, when I see those, I'm like, next, block, mute. This is a lie. You're not really my friend. No. You got to figure out some way to muddle your way through it. Okay, so talk to me about what you think are. I know that you've been involved in a number of these some court cases, some of which have gone pretty high up. What would you say are your main sort of speech priorities at this point in the Trump, 1 year into the Trump presidency as we're recording this?
So there's a lot. I mean, Pam Bondi just gave a speech, I forgot, the Israel Affairs Committee or something with Miriam Adelson, where she basically said that the Attorney General, in case people don't know, I realize this is my life, so maybe not everyone lives and breathes Pam Bondi, but she basically said, they're going to weaponize DOJ to silence, they say, anti-Semitic, we all know what that means, speech.
Under her leadership, the Department of Justice has made combating anti-Semitism a top priority, especially in response to the alarming rise in incidents following October 7. She brings moral clarity, resolve, and an unwavering commitment to justice to this critical fight. Please welcome my friend, the 87th Attorney General of the United States, Pamela Bondi.
Miriam Adelson is amazing. What she has done for Israel, for our country, and for this world is second to none. Thank you, my friend. The sad truth is, for way too long, anti-Semitism has been allowed to grow unchecked in this country. Too many institutions have abdicated their moral responsibility to speak up. Too many so-called leaders have stayed quiet. Actions have consequences, and inaction has consequences too. We've sued violent protesters under the FACE Act for intimidating Jewish Americans worshiping at synagogues. This is the first time since its passage, the FACE Act in 1994, that it has been used to protect a house of worship. Working with Secretary Linda McMahon, who has been a champion for you as well, and Harmeet, we have secured a $200 million settlement with Columbia University for violating the civil rights of Jewish students and Jewish employees. We've secured a $75 million settlement with Northwestern University for anti-Semitic conduct. We've secured a $60 million settlement with Cornell that includes provisions to halt anti-Semitic conduct. And we've launched a full investigation into University of California's system for systematic anti-Semitism.
So I think that our work will be cut out for us. So the deportations were, I mean, that was one of the reasons I left my job, was I was like, this is just the most egregious free speech violation since the Red Scare era, and might like arguably is worse than what happened during that time. So I really, really wanted to be a part of it. Unfortunately, by the time I got the job, other people, those cases are sort of working their way through, and I don't really think it's necessarily wise strategically to start a new one right now. Like Fire's doing one in California, and we have Mahmoud Khalil and a few others. So
because you think it's going to make bad precedent?
Yeah, I think the cases that are going now are kind of enough. So Fire, so there's the ones that are kind of the people who've already been put into deportation proceedings, and so they're doing habeas petitions challenging their detentions on First Amendment grounds. I can explain for your audience if you want, or just assume
Please.
people know.
No, please.
So if you're put in immigration detention, immigration courts aren't real courts, by the way. They're sort of kangaroo courts. They're part of the executive branch, part of DOJ. So the judges are extremely biased and often just rubber stamp what the government does, especially if they're in the South and Louisiana and stuff. That's why the government desperately wanted to get Khalil to Louisiana. So you have the right to challenge your detention in federal court, basically arguing that it's unconstitutional. So Mahmoud Khalil and I believe Ramez Ozturk and a few of the others filed federal habeas petitions arguing that their detentions violated the First Amendment because the real reason they were being detained was their speech. Those were mostly successful at the district court level. Unfortunately, the Third Circuit actually just reversed in Mahmoud Khalil's case. And it was not on the merits. It was on a jurisdictional issue. They basically said you have to finish in immigration court, like get a final determination before you can go to federal court. And it's not as bad as a bad decision on the merits, but it's a big problem because that means people could spend like years in immigration detention, or at least a long time before they have the opportunity to challenge their detention. And that's obviously a significant hardship on most people. So if not everybody. So really bad decision. So that's one area I'm like really concerned with. But so Fire did a case, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, where they weren't filing on behalf of someone who'd been deported. They filed on behalf of people who have not been targeted by the government, but who are basically saying the chilling effect. They're non-citizens and their speech is chilled. They work for the Stanford Daily paper. So it's sort of like a journalistic freedom of press argument as well as free speech.
I've been seeing posts about those Stanford students, but I frankly made a note that maybe I want to have some of them on to talk about it. But for folks who haven't been following, can you say a little bit more about what's going on with them?
Yeah, so I read the complaint in like August, so it's not fresh in my memory, but they're basically challenging the constitutionality of the statute that's being used to deport people. and saying that if it's being used to construe speech, then it's unconstitutional, or it should be construed not to include speech. So because they're saying that these people pose a threat to our foreign policy objectives, basically. And so the argument is, well, Congress can't have intended for that to mean speech because that would violate the First Amendment. So they're sort of proactively challenging it. And the lawsuit was pretty carefully crafted to, I think they found some really good plaintiffs. They found a good jurisdiction. I actually have the same judge as them in a case of mine. So she's a good judge. They got a decent judge.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's like a better case. I feel like I'll just wait and see what happens with that. But the strong arming of universities is another really big issue. I mean, they're basically silencing pro-Palestine activism on campuses entirely, or, on many campuses, and they're doing it through threatening to withhold funds. That's a challenging case to bring. I'm looking for the right fact pattern, because it's sort of this similar job owning theory where you're arguing that the government is forcing the universities to do this. And when any individual person is disciplined, it's going to be hard to show that that was because of the government. Like, and
even
if I want to sue
Trump
the government,
saying stuff like, I'm going to withhold funding. He just says, I'm going to withhold funding to Columbia if they don't, get in line.
Yeah, well, so I think Columbia, that's why Harvard, I think, is winning so far, their lawsuit, because it's the university. But if you want to file on behalf of a person, an individual, like a teacher or student, I think it's harder. And actually, my case that went to the Supreme Court is a big problem, because there the Supreme Court said that our clients didn't have standing because they couldn't show that they had been censored by the government, that the government had pressured the social media companies, but the social media companies might have censored them anyway of their own volition. So we hadn't proven the causal link to have standing. And I was like, a lot of people on the left were celebrating the decision. And I was like, this will be used against us. And it is being cited, in fact, in these cases. So the student is saying, I was kicked out of school because of my pro-Palestine speech, and suing the government. And the court's saying, well, you can't show it was the government. Maybe the university would have kicked you off anyway under their current policies. So you can't show that causal link. So I think it's easier when it's the university doing the lawsuit, because then you have more direct causation.
That's outrageous. I mean, how do they expect you to? What kind of discovery are you getting?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly like, and our argument in the social media cases was, well, we're not going to be able to have all of this evidence up front. Like, we need to be able to proceed with the lawsuit to get discovery, to show this. So, but the courts are basically dismissing, saying, well, you can't make this preliminary showing in order to get discovery.
Oh man, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So in your case that went to the Supreme Court, you're saying that was in the COVID context.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So liberals were celebrating that someone who
not everyone. I don't want to lump everyone.
Sorry,
Yeah. No, it was I who said it,
so
but they're yeah.
Because there's been a shift, because I was watching the body language between you and Jon Stewart, for instance, right? And there were these little edge moments where it felt like he was talking around COVID, and I don't remember exactly what his position was during the COVID times, but I think like many of us, this podcast didn't start till the end of 2020. So I would say, especially in those early days, there was a lot of like, I'm glad I don't have to talk about this online because I don't know what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on. There was some frustration as a consumer of the news and someone who's trying to keep themselves safe, that there was conflicting guidance. I remember by summer of 2021, I worked from home. I had a podcast. So I was late in getting off the list to get vaccinated. I had some, ambivalence about it that I didn't really have to contend with because I was working from home and it really wasn't about me. And then I made the decision to go visit my grandmother and cover some of Nina Turner's campaign in Cleveland. And so I had to go ahead and get it because of all of the discourse around transmission being stopped, allegedly, by getting the vaccine, right? Yeah. So, like so many people, we were living through the mix of information. It was very right-coded to raise any concerns about this. Yeah. You didn't want, especially if you were a journalist or in a position of sort of influencing public opinion, even in a little bit, to get something like this wrong when the stakes were so high and people were dying genuinely in such high numbers. And then going on Rising and having to debate this issue with Robbie every day the following year, maybe confront and have to like kind of fix my opinions on these things. So when I say I, evolved through it in a very public way, I have a lot of sympathy for like a lot of people like Jon Stewart who had to kind of maybe work his way through that in a very public way and maybe got some things wrong at some point. I don't know. I don't remember. But in the context of your conversation with him, maybe I'm projecting this onto him, but it felt like there was some sympathy for your view without a real desire to get into it in front of an audience that might be less sympathetic to the idea that the CDC or the Biden administration or Fauci ever got any aspect of it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you might be right about that. I wasn't sure. And I frankly find the format very hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it, and I really like Jon Stewart, even though we have many disagreements, but I think he's like really funny and a nice guy, and I have a lot of admiration for him. I find the format difficult because a lot of these ideas are very complicated and it's hard to do like two-liners, So that was like a lot of my stress on that was like, how do I get this out in 2 sentences? That's something that really takes 20 sentences to describe properly.
But what would you have liked to have said to him if you were on his podcast instead of, on the news show?
I mean, so I didn't really get a chance to explain why I thought that the officer in the Renee Good case didn't, that wasn't an adequate justification defense and probably would lose in court. I didn't really get a chance to delve into the work I'd done on COVID and why I held those views. I mean, I like to have the opportunity to explain that because I'm not a typical like conservative or right winger. I'm not actually conservative or right wing. Like, I guess I'm probably best described as like a left leaning libertarian. But I would have liked the opportunity also to explain to the audience why some of what happened during COVID was pretty problematic from a civil liberties standpoint. And I saw a lot of the comments were faulting me for sort of both sidesing. And I like. If you say like for who's worse, Trump or Biden? I mean, I would say Trump. I'm very upset about what Biden did with Gaza, and I don't know. It's hard for me to say like what the counterfactual would have been with Trump. I think it probably wouldn't have been any better given what we've seen over the past year. But I think it was completely unjustifiable, and I also, I think there were problematic civil liberties violations with the vaccine mandates at the federal level and the censorship. I think Trump is much more brazen. There are arguments that maybe it's better to have someone like Trump so we can blow the system apart faster. I don't have to go down that road. But I
have been accused of being an accelerationist a time or two.
I mean, I have no faith in the current two-party system. I don't think the Democrats are going to save us, and I think that's like the wrong approach to take. So it's not so much that I'm like, what Trump is doing is really, really bad, and I'm extremely critical of it. It's just, I'm not going to say the Democrats are going to save us, or I wish Harris had won, because that's just not how I see it.
Yeah, which party is worse, I think, is the wrong question. It functions in the same way rhetorically as like, do you condemn Hamas? Like, I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it's just like the wrong question, and it gets us set off, down a conversation that's not going to get at the root of the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Why are we here in the first place? Kamala versus, Trump. How do we end up in this situation in the first place between with voting between two genocidaires? Like, and I reject the framing, because if I acknowledge that Biden or Harris are better, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
You're forcing me to affirm a system that is fundamentally inadequate to begin with, a choice that is fundamentally immoral, frankly, to begin with. So I'm totally with you on that. I am curious to hear your sort of longer, more hashed out explanation of why Officer Ross's justification defense falls flat from a legal perspective.
Yeah, sure. So I would change a few things about my tweet due to like information that came out later. So I initially had said that she was not doing anything. And so, she was just waving the officers past. It does look like they were she and her wife were kind of obstructing traffic. I don't think in a significant way. So I had initially said no reason to stop her. I think they may have been justified in going up to her and being like, hey, can you move your car? So that I would maybe alter in the tweet.
Sure.
But I don't think they had any justification to do anything beyond that because they're ICE officers whose authority is limited to enforcing immigration law. They had no reason to believe that she was impeding. She wasn't harboring any people who are not here illegally. Who are here illegally or anything like that. There's no allegation like that. The other justification I've seen used is that she was obstructing a lawful immigration enforcement operation, but I don't think that works. It has to be a very significant obstruction. So, and here we're not talking about shooting. I'm just saying, like, did they even have a right to arrest her or use very heavy-handed tactics with her? So I think no, they did not for those reasons. Whether he had the right to shoot her, which is really almost a separate question, it's very clear to me no. So to establish a justification or self-defense theory, you have to show that you reasonably believed that you were an imminent threat of death or serious physical injury. You were a third party, but there's no allegation that there was a third party here in danger. So it's clear to me that at the time he shot her, his legs were to the left of the vehicle. He was out of harm's way. I mean, I have real questions anyway about if you really believe someone's about to run you over with a car, do you shoot them or don't you do everything you can to jump out of the way? That doesn't seem...
Right. Because shooting them doesn't stop the car. If anything, it might cause an acceleration.
And when you could see that's what happened. And he's also, a lot of people said, well, he's a police officer. He's putting himself in harm's way. No, police officers or law enforcement officers should be held to a higher standard. They're trained and they, they're supposed to be trying to diffuse situations. So I'm sorry, but that's not an excuse. And even if he could somehow convince a jury with the first shot, I don't think he could, but let's say for the sake of argument, I don't see how he could ever do it with the second and third shots. He was clearly on the side of the vehicle firing in, and you have to establish justification for every use of physical deadly force. So to me, very obvious, I had clients like that when I was a public defender. I don't think there's a jury who's going to, maybe there are juries somewhere who would acquit for political or ideological reasons, but any jury looking at the evidence fairly, I don't think would.
Yeah, it's fascinating to even think about that stage, given that, am I right, that he's still not been arrested?
No, not that I know of. And he probably never will be. So DOJ is the FBI is taking over the investigation. Who actually thinks they're going to do an impartial investigation? Nobody.
Do you... that's... I'm sorry. It's just insane to think that this man who we all saw publicly execute this woman might never spend a day in custody.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if this is a stupid question. Do you imagine, let's say 2028, Democrats in office again, that they would direct the Department of Justice to actually prosecute this man?
I guess, yeah, they could. They could. And also, that could happen. There's also the theoretical possibility of state charges. Minnesota could pursue something. From what I understand, they haven't been given access to the evidence. So that's obviously difficult. There were eyewitnesses, for instance, that a jury would definitely want to hear from. It's not just the video. But I think they also might be reluctant to do so for fear of having, a confrontation with the federal government over this matter. So, but I doubt they've ruled it out. I'm guessing there are some pretty intense discussions taking place in the prosecutor's office there.
Yeah, it's just I struggle. I have to engage with that particular story in fits and starts. It has so much resonance with. It's the same. We've all been saying the same thing over and over again. I'm sorry, but the genre of critique that says, why do you have any expectation that there would be any sort of moral constraints on our own government when we have allowed it to fund and legally enable what's been going on in Gaza for the last 2+ years, I think is one that really resonates with me in the moral vacuity of our own government on both sides of the aisle makes everything that is now happening stateside completely predictable, but overwhelmingly depressing. And the imperial boomerang of it all, et cetera, et cetera. And the fact that, as happens so often, the left has been ringing alarm bells about this, about cop cities, about Cop City protesters. We just had the anniversary of Tortuguitas being killed by cops in Atlanta over Cop City there. The Shireen Abu Akleh's, the Rachel Kier, like on and on and on down the list. We just had Martin Luther King Day. You know, it is all so predictable, and seeing it steamroll forward and the limits of the law as being able to create any sort of accountability, both domestic and international law, I think has been a particularly dispiriting aspect of this. I wonder how you feel about it as a lawyer who's been relying on the law to put some guardrails on our like fundamental constitutional rights, our first and most fundamental constitutional right to put some guardrails on that. I mean, my opening question, it wasn't like, are you prepared to abandon the First Amendment? But I do have this question of, you know, I do think a lot of us on the left thought, well, if we defend the Skokie marches, right? Like if we defend the white supremacists, even when we don't want to, surely this will redound to our benefit. Surely we'll be grateful down the line when we're in the crosshairs. And now it's down the line, and these people don't give a fig about pro-Palestine protesters.
Yeah.
Right? And I it's not, let's throw away the First Amendment, but like, it feels like from a strategic perspective, there has to be some response to that reality. There has to be some strategic shift, knowing that, you know, pointing out someone else's hypocrisy isn't seemingly doing very much.
That's probably fair. I did tell my husband the other day that I kind of wanted to go like give up and run a goat farm. So you aren't totally off base. I really like goats, but I was like, let's just move somewhere like cheaper and have some goats. This is like very stressful, and I don't know if I'm doing anything. It's very relatable.
I mean, many revolutionary has felt this way. You know, you spend your whole. My mother always says this. She's like, both very, you know, not that I'm some revolutionary, but she's both very proud of me for, you know, my politics and sticking my neck out there, and also she's like, my generation. I watched everybody sell out. Because if you didn't sell out, all the true ones, the true-hearted ones, died poor or were killed. You know, look at, you know, how someone like Kwame Ture goes. I mean, he was, you know, a professor at some, you know, but you get squashed and you have to go to second and third rate institutions, and or you die prematurely.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the law is always weaponized, right? It's never going to be administered totally impartially, depending on who's in power and that kind of thing. So I guess the best thing that can happen is for there to be decent people in power. And obviously that isn't working. I saw a poll today on Twitter. I think it was a decent poll. Someone had tweeted, I can't remember who, someone had tweeted it, who I have some respect for, that was showing like more than 2/3 of people under 30 or something identify as independent politically. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, maybe we have a chance of, I mean, I'm not super hopeful because these powers are so entrenched, the Democrats and the Republicans, and they're not going to give up easily. They're not going to let a third party. I mean, I was a huge Bernie Sanders fan. That was like the last time I've been hopeful in politics was 2016. And I mean, we saw what the Democrats did to him. So yeah. So I don't know if it's even possible, but I mean, I guess I just tell myself it would be worse if there weren't at least a few of us trying to hold people to account and being sort of fair and being open to critiquing both sides. And that maybe there'll be more of those people.
Speaking of sort of, you know, people are really mad. I saw that poll as well. Young people are increasingly independent. Even liberals seem to be righteously mad at the establishment for doing such a bad job as a resistance party. Did you see that clip from the I've Had It podcast of Jennifer Welch, the main co-host, talking about, I think she was talking about to David Remnick from The Times about how the Democrats have ignored the base and that people are tired with these kind of milquetoast neoliberal politics, and how she regrets not having supported Bernie back in the day?
I didn't actually watch it, but I saw it going around.
But look at the seeds that Bernie Sanders planted. He never won president, but he sure did a lot of good work for the country. I now regret my vote for Hillary Clinton because his message has aged well. I believe during the primary of 2016, Bernie won Oklahoma against Hillary. And that I know these people, and they're earnest and well-meaning, even though I bash triple Trumpers relentlessly with fangs on my podcast all of the time. They need an off-ramp to get off of this Republican Party bullshit lie of trickle-down economics, of scapegoating marginalized people, of, this massive wealth gap that we have. So if you take somebody who says, I'm going to fight for you, I believe, might not happen the first election, but if there was footing in the state of people running based on facts and for Oklahomans over the course of a couple election cycles, I think you could see change.
Okay, so I like that, right? Yeah. There's a longer version of that where she goes on to say, who I really like is J.B. Pritzker. So it's like, there's this part of me that's like, yeah, great. Even like people who used to be Hillary folks are changing their mind. And then they'll go and say something like, oh, but I like J.B. Pritzker. And I don't have confidence that people like her. Or maybe this is not fair and I'll be pleasantly surprised. Aren't going to fold the second it's President Newsom against J.D. Vance.
No,
or candidate Newsom.
I mean, I barely know who she is, but I can already tell she's someone who would fold. I don't know. I can just read that one. But I mean, I think the hope more lies with the young people, frankly. Like, I think they really are sick and tired of it. They've been dealt an unfair hand. I work with a lot of younger people who are just very hopeless, and their jobs keep getting replaced by AI. They're in debt up to their ears, the student loans. They don't even have a hope that they'll ever have like stable economic circumstances and be able to have a family or whatever they want to do with their lives. And I do they are less hopeful than I was at that age. With reason. And when it comes to Palestine too, I actually know quite a few young conservatives, and they're not at all like the older conservatives on Palestine. They're just like, I don't understand why we support that country. They're awful. Why would we support that? So I do have sort of long-term hope if we manage to survive the next 20 years, which is a question.
Well, that's the if. Are you going to pick a goat farm that's outside of the nuclear blast zone? Tell me where you're going, because I want to come too. Is it going to be safe from the water wars?
That is part of the plan.
Yeah, my mom moved to Cleveland a few years ago, and she likes to call it her Armageddon house. And point out that, we have the largest body of fresh water in the entire planet. The Great Lakes are a resource that you want to be next to. And I'm like, you're making some points, Mom. How many canned goods are in the basement? Is there enough for me to come home? Okay, I said I wanted to give you an opportunity to also talk about the censorship issues under the Biden administration. I do feel as though, okay, I know I just finished saying that, the hypocrisy stuff doesn't go very far. But I do feel like if there were, and not that I'm rooting for the Democrats to rehabilitate themselves, but whoever emerges needs to be able to honestly weigh in on the overreaches that happened under the Biden administration as well as under Trump. If you want to be a critical, a credible critic of what's going on now. I think this with respect to the Epstein files as well, that part of why Democrats are failing to land the message, to land the plane there, is because they were unwilling to use any of this information that was readily available in 2016 because of the implications for Hillary, who was their chosen candidate, and the fallout among many people who had leadership roles in the Democratic Party, including Reid Hoffman, Larry Summers, Pinker, all these Harvard guys, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you think that people have to contend with? What are the big ticket items from the Biden era that if there were genuine accountability within the Democratic Party, they'd be acknowledging at this point?
So I think COVID is one. And I think especially the shutting down of schools, which I do think harmed a lot of children, especially less privileged children, frankly, who didn't have the same opportunities to catch up or to go to private school. A lot of private schools were open the whole time. And I know a lot of people who believe their kids have never sort of caught up socially or academically. So I think there has been a lack of accountability there. And there's a lack of acknowledgement on the part of the Democratic Party that a lot of these measures may have been pointless and heavy-handed from a civil liberties perspective too. The endless masks. I mean, I was critical of them from the beginning, but like when they dragged on for 2 years and you're like, really, we're going to like walk into a restaurant and then take the mask off. I mean, who actually believes that this has any effect whatsoever? But we have to follow these like silly rules. That stuff I think drives people nuts, and it drove me nuts. There's something about just being subjected to this sort of petty, like these petty, ridiculous rules that we can all tell are kind of nonsensical. So I think they should just admit that they sort of dug their heels on that, which is my theory. That there was a political, because Trump sort of waffled on COVID early and maybe didn't take it seriously. There was this like, okay, well, Trump says it's not serious, so therefore it's very, very serious, because there's this kind of, reaction from the Democrats whenever Trump does something, instead of saying, well, Trump is wrong, 99% of the time, but that doesn't mean that we should just, put pieces of cloths over our face forever. Like, we should actually look at the data.
Well, it's interesting. Okay, so let me ask you some follow-up questions here, because I have to confess, I say this often, not that often because it's so polarizing. I occupy a lane on this that I've never really seen reflected in another person, which is that I, from a civil liberties perspective, am somewhat, I would prefer to work more carrots rather than sticks with respect to vaccination.
Yeah.
I think that it is a more significant violation of your civil liberties to require vaccinations than masks, which is,
that's true.
As you put it, a piece of cloth over your face. And my critique of the masking guidelines were, one, misrepresenting that you shouldn't get them first because they were trying to preserve them for healthcare practitioners, which you can preserve them for healthcare practitioners without lying about it, right? Like telling me that you don't need them, or that tying a bandana around my face is equivalent to an N95 mask, I think undermines the credibility of the functioning of a N95 mask or a higher quality mask, which does preclude transmission.
Yeah.
So I agree with the kind of confusing guidance around masks. And I also agree with you that it obviously doesn't make any sense to say you can go to the restaurant with a mask and then take it off to eat. That just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. That being said, I see that policy as being about not wanting to cause economic hardship to businesses and putting economic interest before public health interests, and just not being willing to say restaurants have to shut down for a long time. And that's a kind of like, I don't know. That's a different kind of consideration, kind of a municipal consideration for how many, how serious are you about stopping the spread versus how serious are you about hurting this part of the economy? Are we the kind of country who's willing to actually just pay restaurants to stay closed so they don't have to bear the financial hardship of this public health issue? Maybe that's the kind of thing that we should be doing, not to ignore that there is this economic consequence. But that would be my critique there. And then with respect to schools, I similarly have this feeling like, well, what about what we now know about how effective air purifying systems are, et cetera, to stop the spread? Is there a way that we can acknowledge that the goals of having shutdowns were legitimate, and to pursue those goals with policies other than those that caused isolation and setbacks with respect to student achievement?
I mean, I see your point. We probably disagree on the fundamentals. I mean, I was very against the shutdowns too. I would have, advocated for something like focus protection. I don't know if you heard of the Great Barrington Declaration. You probably did, right?
Sure, of course. I hosted a show with Robbie for two years
I was going to say, I know him too, so from the COVID days. So I probably have a different take on that, and that I think that the psychological harms probably of isolating people, and economic harms are who are not at risk, elderly or having various underlying, not every underlying, whatever you call it. I'm blanking on the pre-existing condition. Yeah, not everything is means you're likely to have a more severe outcome with COVID, but ones that did would have been a better strategy. I just don't think that you can shut down.
Even Jenin, with all of this new research about the long-term immune effects that people who have had particularly, multiple reinfections are contending with.
I just don't know if you can it's actually realistic to say you can shut things down. I mean, like, I don't know. I knew a lot of poor people in New York, like through my work. They often live like 10 people to a house, and dad's a delivery driver and mom is a nurse, and they are essential workers, and they're complete. I mean, no, they can't isolate. They don't have a laptop per kid. They often, I knew families who lived like one family to a bedroom. So you would have like a 5-member family in one bedroom, a 5-member family in another. So 10 people in like a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn or the Bronx. That you can't really isolate. So I really think that those policies were designed to protect the laptop class who, could stay home because they don't have essential jobs. And they were worse for working class people. Whereas if it had been more strategically done, which maybe you can't do either. I mean, I acknowledge part of the problem is I think a lot of it is actually out of our control. I mean, there may be some argument that the hospital's being overwhelmed, so trying to make sure not everyone gets it at once. There's something to that, I wasn't completely like 1 or 2 months in, like, this has to end. After 3 months, I was like, this has to end. This is crazy. Like, we can't go on as a society like this. So I think some maybe moderate measures at the beginning might have been permissible, but for it to go on for so long, I think caused way more harm than good.
It's funny. These conversations are interesting to me because I'll agree with the first part of the concern. Like, I don't think that poor and working class people should disproportionately bear the burden of what a shutdown means. I don't think that children in public school should disproportionately bear the burden. I don't think that small business owners who are shut down should disproportionately bear the burden. But when there are these competing public health concerns, and I am very concerned about, especially given my distrust of the pharmaceutical industry, frankly, there are certain incentives to have us all sick all the time from the kinds of fallout effects of long COVID, and to constantly need the sort of what do they call it? Like to fund the sick economy. Like, I don't trust the government's comfort with long-term COVID from a policy perspective. But that being said, all of those effects that I don't think should be disproportionately borne by poor and working class people, I start to ask the question of, are there ways the government could have supported those populations to not have to make the trade-off from a public health perspective? Is it really that?
There is no way, because if everybody stayed home, I mean, some people have to go make food, right?
Right.
And
frankly,
a lot of people, considering how many people there are in the world, and people have to deliver the food. And
right. And can they deliver it in a high quality mask that's delivered to them for free by the government? Can they do it in make the food or whatever in conditions where they have had ventilation systems that have been demonstrated to dramatically decrease the spread of COVID in those environments, right? Like, that's what I would like to see.
I'm not opposed. I'm certainly not opposed to that kind of stuff at all. And with respect to masks, I'm not like an anti-mask fanatic. I think it was, masks would only really work if everybody wore them properly all the time, like N95s properly all the time. And that's not realistic.
Well,
you can't eat or speak well.
Yes and no. That's a little absolutist. They would work best if everybody wore them properly all the time. The people who are wearing them properly, there is an enormous protective effect for them, and it would be even better if other people were even trying at all to limit the number of particles that are in the air, right? Like, it is a kind of like build-on effect, right? Like, if one piece of Swiss cheese has a lot of holes in it, if you start stacking the Swiss cheese slices, then eventually you can't get through the block of cheese no matter how many holes are in each slice.
Well, I don't know I think N95s that are fit tested work quite well, but it's just not I mean, you can't have kindergartners wearing N95s all day. Like, that's just not humane.
Well, that's where you get the ventilation systems start to come in. And certainly teachers, I mean, part of the concern, right, was that even though most kids don't have pre-existing conditions and COVID was not as deadly or harmful to the majority of children, that, the teachers aren't 5 years old.
Yeah.
And the teacher exposure was part of the problem.
Yeah. I mean, we probably have different views on this. I
find you very reasonable, and that's why I'm like kicking the bear, I guess, even having a willingness to have a conversation. But what's perhaps more interesting to me at this stage is that there was a point in time in like 2022 where Robbie and I were talking about this all the time. Not my druthers, but here we are. There we were. And I thought that COVID was going to be a much more significant issue in 2024. Like, yeah. I would have and I thought, well, RFK Jr.'s campaign is going to have legs because of how motivating COVID is for voters, especially for these kind of independent voters. Everyone's going to have an answer on COVID. Everyone's going to have a line on COVID. And by the time 2024 came around, it was like nobody cared.
Yeah. People don't have long memories in this country, or maybe everywhere.
Well, that's long COVID for you.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like most people aren't even talking about Gaza anymore.
I mean, that is true. We should note that in this last funding bill that Ro Khanna says he accidentally voted for, which is a whole other subject for a whole other episode, there was a ban on U.S. funding for UNRWA. This isn't a decrease in funding. This is a full-blown ban on funding UNRWA. And I think it's today or yesterday as we record, Israel used bulldozers to fully tear down the UNRWA facility in Jerusalem, I believe. UNRWA, of course, being the organization that was set up as kind of like a devil's bargain after the Nakba, where the UN, a new organization that was supposed to prevent things exactly like that from happening, said, okay, we're going to let this one last ethnic cleansing happen, but we're going to set up this organization to, marginally support, like keep Palestinians in subsistence while we figure out a, quote unquote, final solution that never came. And now even that Band-Aid on their own malfeasance has been banned from receiving U.S. funding while their headquarters or one of their major buildings has been torn down by Israel. And you're right, it's not even a blip in the news. The news is talking about a genocide in Iran and, what they say are tens of thousands of people being killed there, and not a blip about new numbers out of Israel that have estimates as high as 680,000 killed in Gaza.
Yeah. No, there's, no conversation about it. And I'm fairly certain that's a complete exaggeration about Iran. I mean, this seems to be a manufactured crisis, but we don't have to get into that.
No, I mean, we just did an episode on that, and I hope to have Anya Parenpil on soon to continue.
I just saw her yesterday. She and Max are good friends of mine. We were over at their place.
Oh, wonderful. What a small world.
I mentioned I was coming on your show, and she was like, oh, I'm supposed to do it later this week. So
yes, we had a little bit of miscommunication. I hope to interview her today as well, but I'll get to her soon. It's probably best that we space out the Iran episodes a little bit anyway, because I just did an Iran episode on Monday. But look, you're fascinating to chat with. I really appreciate that there are people like you who have this kind of ideological consistency, especially with the Matt Taibbi's in the world out there causing me to pull my hair out. Glenn Greenwald is another one. I really appreciate his credibility that he's maintained with his audience while still holding the line on the First Amendment and holding the line on Palestine. Before I let you go, are there any other cases? Is there anything else that you think people should know about that isn't getting enough coverage on the free speech front?
Well, there are a lot of laws that are percolating now, usually state level, that are defining anti-Semitism, redefining anti-Semitism for purposes of enforcing anti-discrimination laws, to include like the IRA definition, the IHRA definition, which, as many people probably know, includes various forms of criticizing Israel and Zionism. Some of them have actually passed. I'm surprised they haven't gotten more attention. So there are, in Texas, for instance, you can be prosecuted under various anti-discrimination provisions for criticizing Israel. I think what a lot of these states do is they purposely don't do it to sort of chill speech while not having to face First Amendment challenges. And courts are really reluctant these days to find favorably for pre-enforcement challenges. So that's before the law's been used, where you're just saying basically this statute threatens to punish my speech, so I'm not going to say the things that it could punish. And
why is that? Why are courts reluctant to take those cases?
I don't know. I just lost my pre-enforcement challenge, so I'm bitter. On a preliminary emergency motion, the case isn't over. But I think there were the 60s, 70s, even 80s were kind of like the heyday of free speech, and courts were actually pretty good about it. They would say, yeah, this statute punishes the kinds of speech that you've engaged in the past. You say you want to engage in that speech in the future. That's enough for me. So I'm going to assess whether the law is unconstitutional or not. Now they say you don't have standing all the time. Or they say it's not ripe, so it's not ripe for adjudication.
That's right. I mean, it's intuitively, the whole point is that you're making the argument that it's chilling speech. Like, the idea that I have to do the thing and be fired before this law that is obviously intended to get me to not say the thing can be challenged.
Exactly. Fired or even prosecuted criminally, like in some states. So it could be even worse. I mean, it's crazy. And the Supreme Court said, definitely in the 60s and 70s, repeatedly, that you shouldn't have to put yourself at risk of punishment in order to challenge a statute that targets speech. But the courts these days, especially the district courts, are just very cowardly. They don't like to fight against the government. It's very discouraging. You can often win at the higher level.
They're chilled?
Yeah.
The courts are chilled, you say?
Yeah.
It's absurd. I mean, before you were talking about, in the context of Mahmoud Khalil, the chilling for non-citizens or people with, some in-between citizenship status. But I know plenty of Americans who feel similarly chilled, not even necessarily because they'll lose professional opportunities, because they'll lose their social media accounts.
Yeah.
I mean, I just was banned from Instagram temporarily. They reinstated me. And I feel like my value to society is being loud about Palestine. So I've just redoubled my efforts to post. I used to, when I saw the particularly outrageous stories about Israel's behavior, I used to almost be like, let me not post that one, because this almost feels anti-Semitic for me to be posting about, Israelis raping people every other day. Whatever hesitation I had about how this or that might be taken the wrong way is completely out the window post having been kicked off of Instagram, and now I'm like a bloodhound, happy to retweet whatever Asselrod or my favorite sort of reporters on the subject have put out there. But yeah, it for most people whose job isn't being professionally annoying, it does have a chilling effect, no matter what your citizenship status.
Yeah, that's true. And you probably saw the story about the woman in Miami Beach who had the cops show up at her door because she had criticized the mayor's stance on Palestine. And she caught it on video, and they were like, it's concerning you tweeted this. Like, this is like classic First Amendment violation.
Picture to make sure it's you. We're not sure.
Okay.
Is that your account?
I refuse to answer questions without my lawyer present. So I really don't know how to answer that question either.
Well,
way.
like I said, you're not going to jail.
This is freedom of speech. This is America, right?
And
veteran.
And I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
We're just trying to see if it's you, because if we're not talking to the right person, we want to go see who the right person is.
Okay, how can I help you?
So pretty much it's just a statement that was made as far as,
verbatim, it says the guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians tried to shut down a theater for showing a movie that hurt his feelings and refuses to stand up for the LGBTQ community in any way. Even leaves the room when they vote and on related matters. Wants you to know that you are all welcome. Clown face, clown face, clown face. 3 days ago.
So you don't know if it was you?
I'm not going to answer whether that's me or not.
Okay.
The concerning part, and not concerning for the person who's posting it, what we're just trying to prevent is somebody else getting agitated or agreeing with the statement. We're not saying it's true or not.
Understood.
That guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians, that can probably incite somebody to do something radical. That's all we're here to talk about. And we wanted to get your side. If it was you that posted that, I would think to refrain from posting things like that, because that could get something and
I appreciate your concern. I appreciate you coming out here.
Okay?
That's it?
That is it.
Okay.
I'm going to maintain my amendment rights to not answer the question about whether or not that's right. I hope
Thank
that's
you for your time.
understandable.
We appreciate it.
Thank you
Yeah,
as
have a good
well.
day, okay?
You as well. Thank you. Take care.
And it seems the mayor sent them, which maybe makes it even worse. I don't know if, I guess I have to think about that one, whether it's worse if the police went there on their own or the mayor sent them. But regardless, I mean, this is just completely insane. And I think it's only going to get worse.
The Libs of TikTok woman had a meltdown about people coming to her door, right? Remember that? And all of the First Amendment people defended it.
Yeah.
Matt Taibbi, was very frustrated, and I expressed support for him when it seemed like they were coming after him. The IRS was coming after him for ideological reasons. Okay.
Yeah.
Consistent. Fine. And now every single day we see the worst infringement of someone's rights. We see tenured professors fired. We see, the Gestapo showing up at people's doors sent by the mayor. We're seeing people shot in the head for blocking traffic at a purported immigration enforcement stop.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the silence from the so-called free speech crowd in this country has been one of the more dispiriting aspects of this whole thing. Even frankly, sitting on Rising with Robbie at times, who's, a friend, but to be talking about the Palestine censorship that was happening immediately and at that time, and to not have the same energy behind it as I was expected to have for COVID stuff, which I felt a little ideologically squishy about, but I understood the argument. I understood the censorship argument, even if I was going to fight with him about the utility of wearing a mask, was very frustrating and very dispiriting. And it again brings me back to this question of how are we, is it useful for us to talk about speech in this way that's a cudgel? If we in this new Trump era have been shown that it is only a cudgel against the left.
I guess my final thought on that is, to me, it's just the principled thing to do. I guess it's not just strategic. It's a matter of right or wrong. And even if it's not strategic, I feel as though I have a moral obligation to defend, to be critical of whoever is doing the civil liberties violation, whether it's coming from the right or the left. So I guess I don't necessarily approach everything in terms of thinking whether it's strategic or not.
I mean, that's fair. Your job and mine are very different.
Right. Yeah.
I guess you need to be fighting the battles you're fighting. And I guess I'm asking myself more than you. Like, I think there was a time when I thought pointing out hypocrisy would move the needle somewhat. And I do think among regular voters, it has more of more influence. But with respect to, the Trumps and stuff of the world, the Republican leadership, it has none. And what I suspect and what I'm fearful of is that if and when Democrats ever get in power again, they're going to start playing by rules that never applied to the other side instead of setting things back. So I was listening to Pod Save America this morning, and they were lamenting, Trump can just take Greenland and nothing can stop him, and isn't it so unfair? And I'm thinking to myself, these are the same people who were like, Biden can't cancel student debt.
Right.
Like, he doesn't have the power to cancel student debt. Trump can unilaterally claim Greenland.
Yeah.
And they, the good liberals who were supposed to be like the left vanguard of the Democratic Party, were also shrugging their shoulders saying, hey, well, it is pretty unreasonable to expect the guy to be able to cancel student debt.
Yeah, but I feel like if our response to everything is just, well, the other side did it too, then we end up in a worse place. I guess as you rightly point out, our jobs are different. I think so. I guess I feel as though my job is to try to fight civil liberties violations by the government, regardless of who's doing them. Just what I see is at the time. That's kind of my job.
I'm having a crisis of self, Jenin. Should Lincoln not have suspended habeas corpus? Should FDR not have threatened to pack the court? A stitch in time saved 9. Like, I don't know the answer to these questions.
Yeah, I don't either.
All right. Well, I won't force you to solve the great moral and ethical questions. I'm quickly coming to a a place where I personally feel like more confident saying good things are good and making just moral arguments, because the alternative is terrifying to me.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's a certain way that dealing with administration and technicalities in rules, the rules-based order has always been in service of rule makers and not substantive justice.
That's fair.
You have to reckon with that.
Yeah, that's fair. I do have hope that, whenever I'm on Twitter or whatever, I come away feeling pretty despondent about the world. I do have hope that a lot of like regular people who don't spend their lives on Twitter or aren't very, very loud on it, are seeing more and more. I mean, you have a very strong audience. I have a decent audience. I think there are more and more people who are objecting to like the Democrat, Republican mainstream narrative and who want something different and who see the problems with both parties and are looking for more principled stances. So I don't know. I have to have
I hear
some
you, Jenin.
hope.
You're telling me to touch grass and log off.
I don't know.
Raise some goats.
I have a 2-year-old, so I have to have like some hope I didn't just bring him into a horrible world, which I sometimes wonder, like maybe I should, I have to maintain some hope.
Fair enough. I appreciate your perspective. Jenin, where can people find more of you and your perspective on the internet and beyond?
So my Twitter handle is at JeninYounesEsq, Jenin Younes Esquire. And then I have a podcast with my co-host Melissa Whitty called Previously Prohibited.
Perfect. Wonderful. And they can find that wherever podcasts are found?
Yeah, basically. Most people stream it on Twitter, but it also streams on YouTube. And yeah.
Okay, perfect. And you guys all know that you can get an additional episode of Bad Faith Podcast by subscribing at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. Those episodes air on Monday. We appreciate your support in this insane media environment. Thanks for listening. As always, take care of yourselves and remember to keep the faith. Hey, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.